Hi, everybody. This is Ben Riggs, your favorite D&D historian. That's Optimus Prime. Sorry. And it is the 4th of July week here in America. It is Canada Day in Canada. So we're going to give you a best of episode here. This is Advanced World Creation with Jeff Grubb and Kevin Kulp. Kevin Kulp is the creator of... Oh man, why can't I think of it? I'm so embarrassed. Timewatch. Kevin Kulp is the creator of Timewatch and Swords of the Serpentine, which are two of my favorite examples from the investigative fantasy genre. Jeff Grubb is himself a legend in his own time, one of the co-creators of the Forgotten Realms, creator of Spelljammer. He wrote the Manual of the Planes, which there have now been 1,000 versions of. This was a great conversation that I just don't think got enough love, and it was almost a year ago, so I'm guessing a lot of you haven't heard it. So enjoy your holidays. We are going to be back with a new episode after the holiday. We're going to have on Dennis Detwiller of Delta Green, and we are going to have Ross Payton of Role Playing Public Radio. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Greetings, one and all. I am Ben Riggs, and with me today are two peerless luminaries of the role-playing game space. First, we have Kevin Kulp. Kevin is an award-winning game designer, but I would describe him as the creator of two of the most exciting games of the 21st century, Timewatch, which in my opinion is the best role-playing game about time travel, and Swords of the Serpentine, which is an investigative fantasy role-playing game set in fantasy Venice, where people use geese instead of guard dogs, and his games are freaky and fantastic and inspirational. And I'm going to say hi, Kevin, before I introduce Jeff.
It's such a joy to be here. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have Jeff Grubb. Jeff is probably best known as the engineer of the Forgotten Realms, but he also brought us Al-Qadim, Marvel Superheroes, the Manual of the Planes, Spelljammer, and my personal favorite, Karamiko's Kingdom of Adventure. He is a legend in his own time.
Mm-hmm.
And I have brought the pair of you together here because I think that there are really three domains of role-playing game design. Feel free to disagree with me, but I think the three domains are adventure writing, world creation, and system design. And the pair of you are certainly world-class in the generation of fantasy worlds. And I'm going to start there and see where this goes. So how do you find the seed that will grow into an entire world?
Wow. You want to go first?
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
I was thinking about this earlier today, and I'm of the opinion that if you are building a world or you're building a campaign setting, what you really need to do is have a very clear vision of what you want, and not just like what the things are, not the nouns, but really the tone and the feel that it has. When Emily Dresner and I were building Swords of the Serpentine and the city-based setting that it takes place in, we were really clear about what it did and didn't have because we needed a very specific feel. And there are a lot of things that got cut because they didn't hit that feel. And I would probably argue, Jeff, you know this way better than I do because you had to work with the whole team, right? I'm working with one or two other people, and it's really nice and simple to sort of keep that vision. How do you handle that when you've got a whole slew of people who are helping you?
Well, that's a good question because most of the worlds I've built have been collaborative in nature. There have been a lot of people throwing in a lot of things from all sides. And as you say, for tone, certain amounts of the tone work, certain amounts of the tone don't, and someone has to be able to make their call. Usually I'm very, open to collaborative efforts, basically because I always feel people work better and are more invested in the project if they have a piece of the action. If they could say, "Ooh, that's something I brought to the system." Dragonlance, I was the third guy in on for that, and we've talked about. people probably heard about the origins of Dragonlance. The idea of Tracy and Laura talking about why don't we have adventures about dragons? And at TSR we were required to come up with all manner of adventure ideas, and Tracy pitched the idea of 3 modules based on dragons, and from that it just grew into the full Dragonlance. And from that, a lot of pieces came from different people. The Pantheon, my native Pantheon had a god of Bahamut and Tiamat, and those became Huma and Takesis, as we just imported it whole over. And as we imported it, we changed things. Characters, gods' names changed, genders changed, which happens a lot in projects I've been working on. A lot of things evolve as far as what the characters are like, and the same thing operates with large scales like the Forgotten Realms and stuff that I've run, like Spelljammer and Keramikos. And the idea is, bringing together a whole consensus while keeping the tone. Now, in Dragonlance, there were things that Tracy did not want. He did not want orcs. We had goblins, we had hobgoblins. We did not have orcs because he wanted to put distance between the Tolkienesque heritage we had. He didn't want halflings. That's where Kender came from. They were originally called Kinder for children, and they wanted them to be tough kids. And so, but everybody kept calling them Kinder, so we changed the name to Kender. And when they did the Dragonlance plays at Gen Con, Janet Pack was Tasselhoff, our representative Kender. And Janet was the cutest, little, Kender with her hair up in the ponytail and the hopak. And at that point, the Kender sort of crystallized into the form they are. He didn't want lycanthropes. He didn't want shape changers because he had that as a plot point within what he was thinking about for the story itself. So there's always somebody who makes the call. But in general, it's this collaborative pulling everybody together into one place. Again, Forgotten Realms. It was originally Ed's home campaign. And he was writing articles for Dragon. I was the person who approached him and said, "Hey, do you want to, sell us your world?" And his response was, "Well, you've been publishing my articles for years now. I thought you already owned it."
You sound just like him.
I've been working with Ed for years, so I can do a good Ed Greenwood. And my response was, "Okay, Ed, we're not going to tell anybody you said that." And we made him an offer. We bought the world, but there were pieces that changed, things that changed because as we moved from his personal campaign into a larger world, which had to encapsulate all of Dungeons and Dragons at the time. So
I think Dragonlance is a really good example because, Jeff, I think that was the first campaign that I can think of where the D&D rules and sort of the settings and the monsters and what have you were really customized for that particular place, as opposed to Greyhawk and Forgotten Realms and what have you, which are a little bit more of a big stew, right, where everything is thrown into the cauldron. There's lots of different societies and different cultures and what have you. And I love that because it was very instructional for me. Instructional is not really the right word. Inspirational. Let's go with inspirational. And what that told me as a player back then was that, hey, I can create a world and I can tweak the rules and the creatures that are in that world in order to tell the kind of story that I want to tell.
exactly.
And that was really powerful for me.
And we had the ability, because Greyhawk was out there and Greyhawk was a D&D world. We had the known world, which is what became Mystara. But was originally created again and was supposed to encapsulate so many different cultures and so many different backgrounds. So we had the ability to be able to say, okay, we're going to create the world, but we're going to keep this, this, and this, and we're going to get rid of this, this, and this, and we're going to add this, this, and this over here that will set it apart. The Realms was very much set up to be whatever it happens. Whatever you come up with, we can find a place for it. I had one encounter with one of my bosses who, came into my office and said, "You know what the Realms really needs? Airships." It really needs zeppelins. And, I looked at him and he said, go find out, can we put zeppelins in the realms? I call up Ed at the library and I say, Ed, you're not going to believe this one, but we've got a request for zeppelins for airships. Oh, you mean the skyships of Halrua, which I detailed in Dragon Magazine number 143. And okay, I got to go down and tell my boss, yeah, we can do airships. So
Which
we
boss? Which
added
boss?
airships. This was our boss at the time was Michael Dobson.
Okay.
So, mhm.
Yeah, Ben, I
But
just
yeah, I mean,
assume that
but
you
you've
have.
actually got the ability with a small product is to keep that tone in place. I mean, do you have those challenges as you develop the world? Suddenly things take a sharp left-hand turn, and okay, this is really interesting, but not what I thought of originally.
Ben, I simply assume that you have every TSR executive memorized and organized in the back of your head at this point.
In what era?
That's John Peterson. Yeah, exactly. I would say John Peterson has it memorized at least until 1985. I'm a little bit better after that. But I'm currently working on a book two, which is I guess going to be like 1999 to 2024, and I've been obsessed with the last 10 years recently, so that's
Hmm.
kind of where my mind is right now.
So it's
But
in the WotC years.
yeah, that's where I am right
Mhm.
now. But I want to go back to Jeff's question for you, Kevin, if that's all right. Of like, is it easier to maintain that tone on a small team?
I think it absolutely was. We had a couple of one of the first things we did with Swords of the Serpentine is to write down sort of what our ground rules were for swords and sorcery. And that was, I think that's listed at the start of the GM chapter of the book. Uh, and they were very specific. So every time something slipped into the setting that was outside of that or didn't carry that tone, it feels really bad about axing it. We had a very good chapter all about curses and diseases and really solid brand new gumshoe rules for they're robust about like different stages of diseases. And about three-quarters of the way through that, I looked at my fellow designer and said, hey, you guys, this isn't a game about catching a disease, right? And they're like, no. So off it went. The I think that there's simply fewer people to wrangle, and it's easier to keep that vision if you do have a small team. Um, when we did Timewatch, the time travel gumshoe game, one of the way that I got around that was keeping control of sort of the core campaign setting, which is, hey, you're a time cop and people are messing up history and you're heading off to find it. And instead, we farmed out lots of other types of setting. A quantum leap style setting went to somebody. Um, Paul Stefko took time crime and your time travelers who are stealing artifacts from across history. Dave Chalker took parallel universes. And so when there was a difference there, I could just say, hey, this is your baby now. Go make it fun.
Did you see the original? Oh gosh, I think it was Pace, the first Pace Setter group
Prime
that put
Master.
together that red box on the time travel game. They did three RPGs: Star Ace, Time Master,
Master. Yep. Jay
and
Tumbleton and
Sandman.
Don Bingle used to run that nonstop at conventions across the
Hmm.
country. I was a
Yes,
huge fan. Um, Although, people, I primarily write for Gumshoe right now, and one of the arguments of why Gumshoe first got created was, hey, it stops that problem where in a Call of Cthulhu game, the GM says roll spot hidden, everybody fails, and they have to try to figure out how that happened. And people say, "Oh, that's not really a problem." Well, I'll be the first person to tell you, I sat in a Time Master game where you needed to make a roll to notice any kind of historical anomaly, and we were sitting at breakfast, and there were tiny little dinosaurs fighting over scraps at our feet, and people failed that roll for 40 minutes. Um, and the GM
yes,
was unrelenting. I wrote Time Watch, Jeff, because I'd played a game of Night's Black Agents, the Super Spies game, and thought,
right.
man, I wish there was a game like Time Master, but like with more modern rules, and there wasn't. So I decided to write one.
Yeah,
Uh,
the I've actually played um, in Steve Winter was our GM, for a Call of Cthulhu type game using the gumshoe rules. And it worked out very well. I had a copy of it, but there was a component missing, so I just couldn't get my brain over of how it functions. So it was like a paragraph that just was left out because they had done it so many times before. It just did not happen, and that sort of left me as a block. But the whole question of, it's sort of a responsibility, and I don't think we explained this, that basically if the plot has to move forward, they lose something. They lose time. They lose, the whole Blades in the Dark / Powered by the Apocalypse type of thing of, well, okay, you get the answer, but there's a risk, there's a cost, there's a payment that must be made in order for it to, as opposed to you just find the clue.
I find really interesting about integrating rules with setting is something that I suspect you had to deal with as I recently reread the Al-Qadim rules, which is how do you customize an existing rule set in order to support and reinforce the setting that you want to create?
Right. And we did that by the thing with Al-Qadim is, and we say this in the introduction, there were three things that introduced as far as tonality. One was the historical Middle East. The one was the Burton Tales of the Arabian Nights. And the third one was the really bad Arabian Nights swords and sandals pictures, with Guy Williams, as Ali Baba or whatever, with the two-headed rocks and the Harryhausen special effects, and all of those became a part of the world itself. When we first started talking about Al-Qadim, about doing an Arabian Adventures, John Pickens, who was one of our editors, started collecting books at used bookstores. And when I took the task on, he came over with 2 huge boxes filled with books about the Arabian Nights, about the historical Arabians. One of my favorites was one that was translated from a book written in Leningrad about the Marxist overview of Arabian tribal culture, which I thought was just, I really like that. And that's where the Shiar came from as far as the name is concerned. So this sort of thing, like where we start with as far as our foundational works and where we grow into it is part of the whole trick to that. Now, part of it was, I guess we dispense with a traditional fantasy idea of pantheons. You worship a particular, we basically embrace pantheons as opposed to, like you worship one god, you worship Tyr, or you worship Timora. Instead, we had 3 different pantheons set up, overlapping, where they say some of them have the same gods, some of them don't, as far as the major faiths within this fantasy world, which were sort of based on different groups of Protestantism. We had our Unitarians, we had our Baptists, we had our Methodists. So it basically it was sort of, that was the way we split out mentally how these different groups, and they had different power bases and they got along. The other thing that was very different about Al-Qadim as opposed to the Forgotten Realms is it's extremely cosmopolitan. There is no dwarven kingdom. That's a decision that we made early on. There's no dwarven kingdom over here, and there's no elven kingdom over there, and they don't like each other, and they don't overlap. Instead, we have like a lot of this is city-based and rural-based. Is the cities have a lot of different peoples and species and races and everything, whereas in the town and the wildlands basically has that same sort of cosmopolitan feel to it.
Struggle how you manage to integrate honor into those rules?
Yes. That we did have to do that for Oriental Adventures. For Zeb
Right.
Cook had to do that as well. And oh gosh, I don't think we used a numerical operation, did we?
So my memory had told me that you had, but when I reread it, I don't believe you
Yeah,
did.
I don't think we really saw it in there. We put a lot of the societal pressure in there from how you interact with the societies, how the world is set up. But the idea of hospitality, for example, the gift of salt is a key, and that was fronted front and center in Oriental Adventures. The cultural material was put at the back of the book. When we were working on Al-Qadim, Andrea Hayday, my editor, did a whole section on Arabian culture, which, was so good, we moved it to the front of the book. And I wanted to give her a co-credit on the cover. And she was adamant. She did not want a co-credit. And we went around on it for 20 minutes. And I looked at her and I said, I know what the problem is. You don't want people to ask you game questions. And she said, yes, that is, I don't want people to corner me at conventions and ask me, so on page 423, why did you say this? No, she did not want that. But she got back cover credit. So she's, but she was very key on making the look and feel and richness of the setting. And like I said, these are group efforts. These are a lot of good people who are all involved in this.
So, did you tend to have a method to how you split up big projects when you're world building?
No, primarily because they were more one person was responsible. They could bring other people in. We could basically get a lot of people because we're going to do the main product and then we're going to have people following along with other products. But it wasn't that difficult. The realms, came from Ed Greenwood in, hundreds of typewritten pages without any spaces or margins on them, basically. And it was a translation and bringing it in from his world and translate. I always consider the realms to be, think of the realms as, and you may do this as well, I'm not sure, as a thing that exists out there. And the game is the lens by which we see that world. And as we change editions, we could change that lens. King of Cormyr is no longer a cavalier, he's now a high-level fighter. But basically we have the lenses change, but the world is still out there. So basically we keep the theme to that. And how we explain the world basically changes depending on what we did. In Dragonlance, they shifted game systems entirely during the Saga era. But they didn't, change the what the Hasbro used to call the core ethos, which is, which sometimes is like an elevator pitch. It's sometimes like the core statement about the world. G.I. Joe is a real American hero. Pokemon has got to catch them all. My one I usually use for the realms, it's always something, because it's a big world where things are going on all the time.
It's the idea of shifting the lens, right? Of changing the viewpoint is really interesting to me.
You do it with Cthulhu,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You have the mythos out there, and then we have all these different systems explaining the mythos in different ways. And they have different points where they think this is the strong point. This is the investigation in Gumshoe, for example, is a key.
In my Swords of the Serpentine campaign, about a year into the game, I was at a Christmas party with a number of the players, and one of my players grabbed me and says, "There's one thing I don't understand. Who are the good guys?" Because, I thought we were the good guys, but I'm so sure we're the good guys. And I thought these other people were the good guys, and they're definitely not the good guys. And I'm like, yeah. And I really enjoy that as you sort of shift viewpoints and shift perspectives in a lot of those things that you've worked on, like that view of who the good guys are can shift. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, interesting thing, not to interrupt too much, is one of the things I start out with a project is two questions: who are you and what do you want? And that definition often forms how you approach. In Dragonlance, you are heroes and you are fighting the evil dragons. It creates a very binary, conflict. You're the good guys. And you're expected to do heroic things. In the realms, you're an adventurer. And that has a different set of rules, and that has a different set of, a scope for them, and who the bad guys are and who the good guys are, a little more situational. So it's Marvel, of course, we have good guys and bad guys and gray guys all over the place. But the idea is, Who are you? What do you want? You want to basically create a safer world in Dragonlance, in Forgotten Realms. You want to become famous or become wealthy or basically create your own community. All of those are, options that are available in the realms.
When you your work on Manual of the Planes really drives this home. One of the things that because I've read that book a lot. um, and one of the things I found really interesting is that as you look at, as an example, the Githzerai versus Githyanki about
Mhm.
conflict, right? There's not necessarily a really clear good guy and bad guy in that.
No, and they came out of Fiendfolio.
I remember that.
I mean,
Yes.
that's one of the things in Manual of the Plains is we had a history, a wildly diverse history of different creatives who have done different things involving it. And how do we bring it together? How do we basically, codify it in such a way that accounts for everybody's previous experience without denying it, without saying, oh no, that didn't really happen. So we end up with a lot of things like demi-planes for shadows, because shadows had, its start and it was growing, and now it's its own full plane within the universe, and to allow that growth, I think, is a big part of the campaign.
Things I want to call out as being something that very much influenced me was how you managed to take these multitudes of different planes and make them actually playable, right? It'd be so easy to be like, cool, it's the elemental plane of fire. You're not going there because you're gonna
But
die.
I did that in the inner planes. The inner planes are incredibly hostile, unless you're, especially the
But you have the
positive
city,
and negative material planes,
sure. But you've
So,
got the city of brass, right? You've
yes.
got oases or chunks of places where you can survive at least long enough to get an adventure out of it, which
Right,
is
we have safe
arguably all you
zones.
need, right?
Right, exactly. We don't need it. They are supposedly limitless, but basically the areas that you're playing in are particular safe zones. But they are also contained because they're within a hostile area. It's not like in a campaign setting where you can say, okay, I don't want to mess with this right now. I'm going to go over the hill and find something else. So because it basically allows us to contain the area a lot more. But yes, I had limitless planes that then had to be contained. That was a neat trick. The interesting thing about manual planes, you saw all the diagrams that were in there back then. That is from my engineering background. I am a civil engineer by training, and
Okay.
I had those overlays that basically the forms where you basically are drawing the little those are all from the old symbol boxes of for laying out the process of how you're laying out the project. So
We spent an embarrassing quantity of time going over those. Yeah, absolutely. That's it worked. It was very successful.
well,
Uh,
that's good, and I'm very happy for it.
you was there is there any story behind how sort of Manual of Planes fed into Planescape? Were you involved in that process at all, or were you
I
gone from
was
TSR by then?
I know I was in the building,
Okay.
and Planescape was Zeb's, so he again took the
All
foundation
right.
work
Yep.
that we did and then developed and grew, and the where Planescape was. This is a good example of how things evolve and change. His approach was very much philosophers with clubs
Right.
for the factions. And he came to me and he said, okay, you know how in the central plane, concordant opposition, yeah, the outlands, okay, fine. Well, it basically ends up in this, spike with, nothing with it. It goes up, it's an exponential curve. It always is going up and there is no top. And I say, yeah, we're going to put a city on top of it. Okay, it's an exponential curve and there is no top of it. I know. We're going to put and that's where Sigil came from, Sigil. And it
Hold on.
was,
Hold on. We can settle this right now. Is it
no,
Sigil
no,
or
you
Sigil?
can't.
Ah,
Because I switch back and forth myself. I say sigil, but I have heard sigil as well.
I mean,
So
I thought Zeb said sigil, but
yeah,
I'm not going to ruin anyone's fun.
I'm not going to harsh anyone's mellow on what the official title is. You'd have to chase down Zeb, and then you'd have people saying, "Oh, I disagree with that." But sigil makes more sense to me.
Right.
But he had it, basically the city, the ringed city, the different factions that were in charge. He added a lot, and a lot evolved out of that. And then we had the outlands with the various gate towns, and then beyond that, we had gotten to more of the traditional. This is what the various planes look like. And as far as a support product, we saw all the box sets that basically got the planes of law, planes and planes of chaos, etc. And other people brought their stuff to the table. So
that's really an expansion of the natural what you were doing in creating, the bounded oases which were playable spots in the hostile planes.
right.
The gate towns made that even more accessible, is what
Mhm.
we found. Yeah. I'm stating the obvious, I know, but
No. It's the idea of, like this is how we found Orcus's corpse out there at one point, in the ethereal plane. And it's just that people bring things to the table. And I think that's one of the great things about these shared universes is we get different approaches and different evolutions. And, we haven't really in I think it was third edition, we sort of like walked away a little bit from the Great Wheel and said, well, here's another option. It's called the Great Tree. Basically we have various things. And we were sort of like saying in the revision, we were saying, here's this great idea. Here's a great example. You don't have to use it. And I think people are much more comfortable with the Great Wheel. And I think it's made a comeback as a result. Oddly enough, in my original campaign, it was a hex map, not a great wheel. I had a hex map, and I had six, planes that were around it, and then beyond it, six more, more planes, and then beyond it, more planes, and that was my expansion for it. But again, the original Great Wheel, as it appeared in Dragon Magazine, was the Great Square, and had inspiration from Steve Marsh, who had a lot to do with it. And Gary credits him as far as being, instrumental in setting all of this up in the first place.
you can tell that I'm not really an old school gamer because I'm allergic to hex maps.
I come in through the SBI Avalon Hill door. That's what was available when I was in high school,
You're going to say something, Ben.
I did want to mention that, you know, Jeff having come up with an entire cosmology that had to fit the pre-existing canon laid down by other authors is such a titanic effort. But you might match that with your work on timelines in Timewatch.
Right.
Could you talk to us a little bit about that coming up? Because again, well, could you describe what the timeline is like in Timewatch, and then anything about the creation of that?
Sure. I will say that. Hang on, let me just see. Do I have a copy right here? I do not.
I'll get one. I'm just going to turn my camera for a second.
Exactly.
You guys keep going.
So the one of the most interesting parts of that entire project was trying to figure out what the timeline of the universe was when it comes to time travel. And the way that I actually did that was I jumped on Wikipedia and looked at the Wikipedia timelines for basically from the start of the universe up till the present. And they have really interesting ones. Then I took that and for pretty much 400, 500 entries, I made an entry on the timeline from the start of the universe to the far future, where every single entry on the timeline is actually a plot hook for a Timewatch game.
Okay.
So you can grab that timeline, flip to any particular entry in any particular year, and use that as your adventure seed. Timewatch is a little bit unusual in that, of course, it's rooted primarily in the real world, unless you're doing one of the side settings. But there, you have to sit there and think through the process of, oh, if something changed, how does that ripple forwards? I'll give you an example of that. A friend of mine pitched me an adventure, which we ended up writing, something called Font of Knowledge, where people really didn't learn to read for a long time because Gothic blackletter is really difficult to decipher.
Right.
And so somebody went back into medieval times and found a way to get the church to adopt Comic Sans.
I was going to ask, was it Comic Sans? Yes, it's Comic Sans.
It was Comic Sans, right? Terrible. Uh, the thus hastening the technology by centuries, thus getting the evil AI established before Timewatch was ever established, meaning that the hostile AI could take over the timeline before anyone was there to stop it. Anyways,
Right.
it's um, the and then you start at the back and then let people figure it out and go back the other direction. Really interesting challenge. The unexpected side effect is that I can now no longer watch a time travel TV show without being a giant pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
the
there are different rules about how time travel works. Does time, is there one timeline? If you basically go back and change something, does that create a divergent timeline? And does that erase the previous timeline, or do both timelines exist? These are meta questions for you.
do you remember? Did you watch Legends of Tomorrow at all, Jeff?
My wife did. So
Okay.
I basically got all the fill in from her telling me about it.
One of the first episodes, Hawkman dies, and they're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, we're very sad that Hawkman dies." I'm like, Hawk keeps reincarnating. Just time travel and pick up another one. Or
Yeah.
hey, go back 5 years, pick him up, mind wipe him before you send him back. It'll be fine. No,
Well,
uh,
the various comic universes are filled with this sort of thing.
they sure, yeah.
Mark Grunwald back in the 70s had a uh, fanzine called Omniverse, where he was basically set down a lot of the rules that were adopted for how the various dimensions and different comic book universes worked and how they interacted. And it had like a lot to do with the whole, if you diverge the timeline, how do you, then when he became a comic book writer, he basically used those rules and applied them to the Marvel universe. So, and that's still a big part of it, but they keep playing games with it.
I'm going
Go
to
ahead.
So like
interrupt
I
to
had
hold this
Ben,
illustration up to
yeah.
a
oh there we go.
camera.
Yes,
Mhm.
the main river of time and the various tributaries.
Right.
The idea being is that time's a river. You don't change a river by paddling your feet in it. You have to really work hard to make a diversion at somewhere that the river can jump the banks.
Hmm.
And that's where an alternate timeline gets established. And bad guys work really hard in order to do that to change the future
Right.
or the
Like an
past.
oxbow in the Mississippi, for example.
Exactly like that. And just like an oxbow, when somebody fixes it, there's still some water in there for a while, like the Great Salt Lake, until it evaporates. So
Right.
one of the bad guys in the game are sentient velociraptors or velociraptors, if you want to be funny, which I really don't. The Are sophosaurs, we call them, who were from an alternate timeline where the meteor never hit the Earth. And so
Okay.
they developed, really to be extremely smart and psychic. And then, of course, Time Watch gets involved. They go back in time. They make sure that the meteor does hit the Earth. And now we have a lot of pissed off intelligent dinosaurs in a dying timeline who have figured out how to time travel and whose job it who decide that the way to punish humans is to ruin human culture. We already
Okay.
have other bad guys who want to kill people, so we wanted something different. So in this case, remember the Ernest Goes to Camp movies, all the Ernest movies? Yeah,
Hmm.
those were funded by Sophosaurs.
Okay.
Um,
I'm
um,
working on a project right now involving going back in time and dealing with mind flayer dinosaurs.
oh, that's
So,
great.
isn't
Oh,
it?
fundamentally approve. Yeah,
Mhm.
in this particular case, there's a way to do time travel as very serious and very strategic and very scientific, and you never cross over. And for me,
Mhm.
that's simply not fun. And so, really, we built that game to be able to do all of the stupid time travel tricks that you've ever seen in Bill and Ted and in any time travel movie. If you want something, you just say, hey, next week, I'm going back in time and strapping a gun underneath this desk.
Yeah.
And if you make your roll, you've got a gun right now. Um,
Oddly enough, that sort of thing is what they're doing in Blades in the Dark and a lot of modern games. So
that's
the
right.
idea is
Mhm.
I'm going to say, oh, by the way, I have the key because of this, and there is a consequence as a result of that. So you're seeing that in storytelling. Have you read the Anubis Gates?
I'm familiar with it, but haven't read it.
Okay, it's big theory about time is a river, but it's frozen. and you can only punch holes in it in certain locations. So they can only hit particular locations within it, but time is also inflexible. So the guy who goes back to study this one composer that he was an expert on and knows everything the guy did, it goes back and finds the guy doesn't exist. And he becomes
It's the
that
guy.
composer in order
Yes, he
to,
does.
just, not intentional, but, basically he becomes the composer that's part of the story of that.
Spectacular. I'm a huge fan of John Harper and John's works, such as Blades in the Dark, and
Mhm.
the flashback technique in Blades in the Dark, as well as the preparedness test and the flashback that Ken Hyde and Robin Laws put in the Gumshoe. All those
Mhm.
things really, those mechanics speak to the sort of thing I love best. We saw it in Leverage as well, where you can really run a great heist by
Mhm.
being able to say what you think is going on is not really what's going on.
Exactly. You can't follow it linearly the way we do within a traditional fantasy campaign. You basically can go back and basically say, okay, well, this is what really happened. So, and this is interesting. I'm actually involved in a Blades campaign on my Monday night campaign. Steve Winter's son Alex is running it. So there's about 5 of us all involved. We're just getting started, and we're just sort of like shaking off that D&D. We've been playing D&D in Steve Winter's campaign for like years, and now we're just shaking all that off and trying to embrace this different approach to role playing. I almost think it feels like a different style of RPG entirely, much like when LARPs first showed up. They felt like it was a completely different game as opposed to the game that we had been playing for so long.
I agree. One of the things I love about that is that I really think that people become better players the more different types of games they play because
Yeah.
um like D I love D&D, but D&D is really good at modeling D&D, right? And that's true for world building as well. You create a
Mhm.
lot of exceptions to that, but in general, sort of the default D&D world, I would argue, isn't like other fantasy games. It's quintessential D&D.
Yeah,
Uh,
D&D created its world. The rule set, the world that we build, Forgotten Realms Dragonlance, is simulating that particular world, but by the same token, that world plays by D&D rules, you know. So they'll have whole level idea of levels, and we don't say them per se, though there's an entire genre out there now called lit RPG where and Ready Player One operates that
mhm.
space as one of the ancestors where you're in a game and you're in a game and you want to learn the rules of the game, so therefore you have to be able to survive in the world. You have to say, okay, people react like this because that's the way the game works.
Either of you
So
read Dungeon Crawler Carl?
I
no.
love I love Dungeon Crawler Carl so much. The audiobook is spectacular. After I talked a friend into getting the audiobook, promising him that I would pay for it if he didn't like it, he texted me back to say that he had almost driven off the road from laughing too hard, about three-quarters of the way through the first book, and that he had already bought the next five. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's a delight.
Okay.
Um, it's a delight. Uh, the and the idea that you can sort of integrate both really strong story and really strong fiction as well as sort of bring those gaming aspects up front and not hidden is an interesting one.
Well,
Uh,
is we have different methods by which we're presenting the world too. And they have their own set of rules. Our novels have a different set of rules than our games. The computer games have a different set of rules of how. That's why we come back to the idea of the realms exists out there, and this is how we explain it. Whether it's an uh, iPad game or it's a trilogy of books, they all come back to that core center of the world itself, and that allows you to basically present. And when we do a movie, I watch the Dungeons and Dragons movie, and when they hit something that
like,
I recognize, I went, ah,
yeah. Uh,
hey, Forrest Gray, I know that group.
I remember, and I'm hesitant to say the game because it is a spoiler, but there is a game of sort of weird, realistic fiction where one of the things that you find out is that the ultimate campaign secret is that you're in a game and that
Yeah,
somebody is playing you, right? And when I first learned that, it kind of broke my brain a little bit.
you
Trying
know,
to picture what my character would think, realizing that they were a character. Yes, that's
we did They did that for a Dungeons and Dragons Open at Gen Con when I was just getting started. And the last room after you fought all your way through, you'd come in and there'd be a room with someone sitting there and other people playing at the game. And what you had to do was you had to tell the DM to stop. And and literally that's what my group did. Is they basically there was pandemonium and everybody was talking, and one of the kids says, "Hang on, Jeff, stop." Okay, you win. So
Most lovely things that happened to me during the pandemic is I got a message from somebody, and it turns out that they're, good friends who had been gaming together. The pandemic hit; they were isolated on different parts of the country, and it was their Timewatch game that ended up getting them through it.
mhm.
But the thing that I found particularly funny is that the ultimate bad guy in the game turned out to be me.
Okay.
That the bad guys had destroyed the time travel organization enough that the only place that Time Watch existed is in a rule book written by this guy. Um, and the GM stalked me enough that she created a website that was ostensibly my website that listed all of my games. And then as the agents in the Time Watch game changed stuff and defeated sort of the sub bosses, she would change the website that they thought
Mhm.
was really mine until they were at one point they were questioning whether or not I actually existed or if she made me up entirely. Um,
Ah, great. And
Delightful.
ChatGPT has scraped that, and now you basically all your information of your alternate self is into the mass brain. So
Fascinating.
I've got that problem. There's another Jeff Grubb out there.
Oh, really?
He worked for Giant Bomb. He actually, which is a computer game website, and now he's one of the owners of Giant Bomb. They just had a big upset. They basically closed down, and then suddenly he and another Jeff purchased it. And we're always having that crossover where people are contacting me about his stuff, and people are contacting him about my stuff. So we have two Jeff Grubbs, and we're both working in the computer industry. He does podcasts and reviews and that sort of thing, and I write for Elder Scrolls Online. So basically there's been this weird dualism in both of our sites, where we cross over in social media, say I'm not the guy you're looking for, you're looking for the guy over there, but AI is just taking it all in and saying, oh, Jeff Grubb, he's a writer and he works
I
for
showed
Giant
up at a
Bomb and he
game at
created
a
Manual of the Plains. No.
oh, I showed up at a game convention some years ago at Metatopia, and they said, "Hey," and I went to go check in, and they said, "Hey, you've already checked in." I said, "No, I haven't. Also, you have my company name wrong." They're like, "No, we don't." There's another Kevin Culp who's a game designer.
Oh God. Well,
He's a he does dice games, so we're a little bit outside, not as bad as yours.
I've also had uh, my identity stolen at a convention.
Oh Lord, look at that.
Basically, I was working along at TSR, got a phone call from a convention down in Texas that basically said, "Excuse me, we want to hear about Jeff Grubb. We understand he's a house name." And the secretary put them through to my phone, and I had to explain, no, I'm Jeff Grubb. I'm the only Jeff Grubb. I'm the Jeff Grubb who, has done all of this stuff. Because they were approached by a couple who basically claimed to be Jeff Grubb.
Oh my
And they
gosh.
were a previous Jeff Grubb. They were not the current Jeff Grubb because I'm a house name. And basically somebody else was now Jeff Grubb. So they couldn't talk about anything I'm working on right now, but they could talk about the older stuff that they wrote as Jeff Grubb. And I had to explain over the phone, and we're in cubes. So everybody else is hearing this conversation that no, I'm Jeff Grubb. There's one Jeff Grubb. The next Monday was Jeff Grubb Day. Everybody in the office wore name tags that said, "Hi, I'm Jeff Grubb." So, it was like Steve Shen's like second day on the job, and everyone he was introduced to was Jeff Grubb. And the meeting notes for the day basically read, "Attending Jeff Grubb, Jeff Grubb, Jeff Grubb, Jeff Grubb, and Jeff Grubb. Jeff Grubb suggested this, but Jeff Grubb thought that was a horrible idea." So,
Did write a Time Watch game once where everybody was the same time traveler, but from six different parts of their life.
ooh, that's
Um,
great.
but it's not as good as that.
Mhm.
Hey, Spelljammer was your baby, right?
Yes.
I have a very important question that if I don't ask, my wife is going to be very peeved with me.
Okay, I have an answer.
Miniature giant space hamsters. What's their
Yes.
origin?
Oh
Uh,
gods. Okay.
so let me tell you why I'm asking this.
All
Because
right.
I was kind of dubious on Spelljammer. The genre simply wasn't one that I ever really considered beforehand. And then
Hmm.
I ran across the giant miniature space hamster, miniature
Hmm.
giant space hamster,
Minerjat, yeah.
and um, and I was so delighted by the whimsy that I went and gave the setting the look I should have given it in the first place. And so I feel like this is a question I get to ask.
Well, this is a good example because it undercuts the idea of many people contributing to what we do, in the fact that I blame Roger Moore. And the literally when we were designing the ships for Spelljammer, I would have a request for Jim Holloway, give me a ship that looks like a squid, give me a one that looks like a nautilus, give me one that's built around a big gun. And he would bring them in and we would basically go over them and say, okay, this works, this works. Oh, I really like those. And for gnome ships, we said, what does it look like? Well, it looks like two other ships sort of crashed into each other. So he gave the front end was a caravel, the back end was a liner, and on the sides there were these big side wheelers. And someone asked, well, what's the deal with the side wheelers? You don't really need those for, getting through space. I said, oh, those are giant hamster wheels. For and Roger Moore was within earshot and thought that was hilarious because that's where the giant space hamster came from. The fact that it was an offhand comment. He wrote up the 2-page monstrous compendium where he's talking about giant space hamsters and he's talking about the hamster of fear and flame and the giant woolly space hamster, woolly Rupert, and all of these, the displacer hamster, and of course among all of them he had the miniature giant space hamster, which of course was a hamster. And from there, and this is great, it went on to Minsk and Boo, Go for the Eyes Boo,
Yep.
from Baldur's
Hmm.
Gate. Okay.
Yep.
And from there, the company basically was also doing Halo later on. And one of the items you could purchase in game was a miniature giant space hamster for your room. So basically, it has a continuation all the way through of people dealing with giant space hamsters all the way.
I love ripples like that. This is what led me to write Timewatch, right? The
Mhm.
idea that one small thing can ripple out in innumerable different directions, and
Exactly.
you snip it at the bud, and everything else shifts.
And would I have stopped, not have said that if I had known what was going to happen? Nah, I wouldn't.
No, you shouldn't
I
have.
would have
That's
I would have
yeah.
let it slide. It's very very que sera sera. I have said things that I have lived to regret. So
So, since we're winding down, let me ask kind of a focusing question. And feel free to take a second to think about this, but if there's someone listening right now who is interested in creating their own world or and maybe hasn't before, what work would you send them to for inspiration, modeling, something that you would if you were teaching, World Design 101, what would one of the texts in that class be? And again, feel free to take a second and think about it.
Or I know I can talk about my journey on that. I found world design to be incredibly intimidating for a very long time, and that's true on city design, right? I am now like city design is now my bag, and it's one of the things I love best. But for a very long time, it was terrifying, and the idea of trying to design countries and the tone and the nature and the takeaways from those countries was really hard. There is a lot of reasons that one should scorn the Belgariad by David and Lee Eddings, for a fact, especially because the people who wrote it turned out to be utterly reprehensible. But the books themselves were a really good education for me in that each of the countries in that world have a very distinctive nature, very distinctive people, and a very distinctive tone. And I think that for me, that was the start of saying, okay, there are ways that all of your countries don't seem like the same country, that you can make the architecture and the nature of the people and the stereotypes to some extent speak that this is a different place and the people are fundamentally different from these other countries. So that was sort of my start. Jeff, what do you think?
It's interesting because one of my challenges I see when I'm building worlds nowadays is I know too much. Because I've read a lot of histories, a lot of backgrounds. So if I say I want a star fort in this area, okay, well, that basically means I've got, artillery and I've got a certain type of design and I've got a certain type of technology. No, no, that's just too much. I'd actually go back to Grandfather Tolkien on this, in the fact that he had culturally distinct areas that basically separated physically in space. But Hobbiton is not Elrond's place, it's not Moria, it's not the Elven lands. It basically Gondor, Rohan, they basically have their own distinct personalities. And if you take it apart and look at it from a world building standpoint, you can see they have different ethoses and different backgrounds and basically he's created his timeline to accommodate all of those. Hobbiton the Shire is very British, middle class, rural, landed gentry sort of area, and that's not repeated anywhere else in the world. It's just like this little piece that just exists off to the side. When you get to the other civilization in The Hobbit, you basically are seeing Lake Town, which has its own feeling and its own vibe as a result. So I'd say, basically take a look at Tolkien for just as far as how he is building his world.
I design by landmarks. That's true for both cities and towns and countries. I
Hmm.
think about, okay, like, for instance, if I happen to fly to Cairo right now, right? What would it smell like? What would it sound like? What would I see as I
You
was
know,
walking through the
I
streets?
lived in
Hmm.
Cairo for 2 years, and I can tell you
So-
exactly what it smells like.
But
I
that's
could have
that
said Venice. It could be worse.
that's very, very true. So and the idea we play a lot of Cthulhu. So we did a whole, did the Massacre of the Nyarlathotep,
Right,
and
right, right,
each of
right.
the areas there had its own vibe and its own feeling. I'd end up doing a lot of research on those areas to get the feeling correct. So you could, basically, if you were in uh, uh, Nairobi of the area, different than Cairo, and basically how does it all fit together?
It grew up in Vermont in Whisper in the Darkness country, and
Ah,
yes.
God.
I love this for world building because if you can capture, you don't have to design like top down everything a person sees. All you
right.
have to do is be able to give them the feeling of what it would be to look like and feel like to be there, and then their brain will fill in everything else.
And they'll assume that you had it planned like that all along.
That's right. Listen to your players and steal
Another
figure out
author
fun
basically
stuff.
asked my wife and I wrote books together, and she wanted to know which one of us was the professional musician. And the answer is neither one of us, but we knew enough to be able to and create the illusion that we knew what we were talking about. So,
Wow. Then I will also ask, what could people purchase that would send money into your pockets, perhaps by way of royalties or something like that?
go first.
Jeff's being kind of them. Okay, no problem at all. So the uh most of my games have been published by the glorious folks at Pelgrane Press who do Gumshoe. My first game for them was called Owl Hoot Trail. It is a combination of old school D&D and a Clint Eastwood Western. I first wrote it thinking that it was going to be just D&D with guns, and really it's a Clint Eastwood movie with elves. Man, that is one dangerous game. And let me tell you, all 14 people who've played it love it. Um, the Timewatch is through Pelgrane, and there's lots of accessories for that. The most recent game from them is Swords of the Serpentine, which is an investigative swords and sorcery game that I really take deep delight in. My co-author Emily Dresner and I had a huge amount of fun building that world. I'll when I get off my duff, probably the next year or so, I'll also be publishing a self-published game called Topple the Kingdom, where you do a huge amount of world building up front. You then ruin that world and define the bad guy who destroyed it, and then you go after the bad guy.
That sounds all good. A lot of my work is available in better used bookstores across the country. All the material, as far as what I get for royalties, my old Forgotten Realms books, stuff from WotC, TSR, we still see a small royalty from that. I've done novels for other worlds like Warcraft, Starcraft. I did a Star Wars novel before they revised the universe again, and so I see occasional payments for that. But most of the material I've done has been, work for hire. I'm an employee for TSR and then WotC. For the past 20 years, I've been working for computer game companies like on Guild Wars, ArenaNet, on Guild Wars 2, which I'm very happy with, and currently for Elder Scrolls Online. So you can find my words of wisdom scattered throughout those particular campaigns. And of course, talk about working in computer games is an entire another hour of discussion. So
Wow.
Ben, what's your most recent book?
Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
I wish,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I really should mention more on my podcast, but I assume that probably wrongly that is what brought people to me. But yes, if you want to hear the story of how Dungeons and Dragons almost died in 1997 and was saved by its bitterest rival, please go to a bookstore near you and pick it up. Thank you, Kevin, for asking that question.
Superb. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't have asked.
Well, Jeff and Kevin, I can't thank you enough for being here. This has been delightful. Before we started, I was like, just have a great conversation. That was a great conversation. That was wonderful. So thank you so much. And listeners, please keep listening. Tell your friends about this podcast. Subscribe to it. We have a Patreon. It's only $3 a month, and you get extra episodes, like the one where I interviewed Zeb Cook in Hugh Hefner's room at the Grand Geneva, which that's worth $3 right there. It's amazing. So
they moved the bed, just so you know. The big circular bed not there anymore.
Oh,
I was there actually when they were shutting it down. They basically, when they were auctioning off all the pieces of the old Playboy Resort, and TSR actually recorded some commercials in the recording studio there. So
I keep hearing stories about that recording studio at the Grand Geneva. People keep saying like Violent Femmes recorded their first album there, crazy stuff.
I mean, it was a professional record. We did, oh God, it was about the time that E.T. came out, because the commercials we recorded had some references to, we were the game they were playing that they didn't mention in there, because of course we didn't give them permission to mention it there.
You fools! Sorry, not you.
You and M&M's, man. Reese's Pieces.
M&M's. It was Reese's Pieces got its launch. Yeah.
That's hilarious.